Buonasera, buonasera a tutti. Io ho un grande piacere oggi pomeriggio di invitare sul palco Peter Bil'Ak.
Buonasera.
Farò una breve introduzione in italiano, poi passeremo all'inglese, quindi per chi di voi avrà necessità o opportunità di usare le cuffie può farlo procurandosele all'ingresso. Allora, perché dico è un grande piacere? È un grande piacere avere Peter perché con la sua partecipazione abbiamo ampliato il campo di indagine di SEED, di questo festival che oramai da qualche anno tenta di indagare la possibilità che il design, il progetto ha di produrre cambiamenti e farlo guardando al tema dei grandi mutamenti che abbiamo davanti. Voglio dire, Lucio Caracciolo ce ne ha parlato poco fa, prendendosi la responsabilità di lanciare delle sfide e quindi farlo parlando di architettura, urbanismo, pianeta, geopolitica, ha un'immediata referenza con l'obiettivo che SEED si propone, ma all'interno di questo tema c'è un campo del progetto che, essendo io qui come presidente nazionale AIAP e docente di design della comunicazione visiva, e quindi rappresentando nello specifico questo ambito del progetto, proprio il design della comunicazione specifica assolve, ed è quello di far compiere al design un'azione di mediazione, cioè di rendere accessibili contenuti o la possibilità per i cittadini di agire che altrimenti non abbiamo, non avremmo. E quindi quando ho pensato a Peter, pensando a questo ampliamento del campo di indagine di SEED, l'obiettivo è stato proprio pensare a un ambito specifico del design della comunicazione che è il type design, quindi il disegno tipografico dei caratteri, il sistema di notazione con cui noi riusciamo a leggere le informazioni e a decidere come agire nel mondo, pensato nella sua funzione più inclusiva. Peter Bil'Ak è un type designer che lavora da molti anni in questo campo, lavora a Den Haag, quindi in Olanda. Ha una caratteristica fondamentale che da sempre si è applicato al type design, che è uno dei campi del progetto grafico forse anche più trendy, per così dire. Oggi va molto di moda disegnare caratteri, ma Peter l'ha sempre fatto invece con una grande attenzione alla ricerca e alla dimensione inclusiva di questo campo del progetto. È stato fondatore di Typotech, che è questo studio collettivo Type Foundry che si occupa di disegnare caratteri, svolge anche progetti nel campo dell'identità, insomma, e lo fa da molti anni. È stato fondatore di una rivista emblematica nel campo dell'autoproduzione editoriale che è stata una dei grandi casi editoriali di cui nel mondo dell'autoproduzione editoriale si è parlato. È stato promotore di un progetto che è Works That Work, che ha cominciato proprio a mettere il focus su come il design si debba occupare di questioni centrali per le necessità inclusive, accessibili della popolazione, e da anni svolge un'attività di ricerca sul rendere visibili tutti quei linguaggi e quelle lingue nel mondo che in realtà sono sottostimate nel modo in cui la tecnologia, prima si parlava di tecnologia, invece rendono possibili la possibilità per le persone di comunicare. Insomma, prima Peter mi diceva nel tuo cellulare i linguaggi possibili attivabili sono 21, nel mondo le lingue che si parlano sono più di 7.000. No? Quindi pensate quante sono le persone che oggi non hanno la possibilità di digitare un messaggio a qualcuno nella propria lingua. Ok, Peter, then we shift to English. I give the crowd a short introduction of your work or who you are. And I say that I thought about your invitation as an opening phase for the festival, talking about how communication design can be an inclusion tool for allowing people to access more their rights in doing things in their world.
Well, this is correct. This is what we do. This is what we've been doing with other design disciplines. You know, you mentioned publishing, and this is what we try to do now, directly working with digital infrastructure that supports type design and eventually also type design work.
We know, all of us that knows your work, that you are a researcher, perhaps more than a designer or just a designer. So doing research on doing type design means make visible more than just the language that we know. And translating many languages that are just spoken into typographic glyphs means something.
Yeah, I think I'll be talking about this in a presentation that ultimately, I think many of us, if you work in design or if you work in engineering or if you're working in architecture, at the end you care about positive change. You're trying to make sure that when you get involved in a project, you leave the project and the planet and the people around in a better state than before. This is what we've been doing. We try to identify the saturated areas where most of the work have been done, and the less saturated areas where there's a lot of work to be done, and there's less willingness to do it because it's often areas where people consider to be non-markets. So many designers tend to make decisions about their actions based on market accessibility, about potential reactions and sales and projections. We try to think of a wider responsibility that well, of course we need to think in terms of we are a private company, like how to make it happen, and I'll talk about it as well, how to finance projects. But ultimately I care about the impact of work, and often in areas which are underrepresented and unexplored, the possibility of making a positive change is much greater than in areas which have been completely dominated and there's too much work already going on. So we often seek actively areas where there's very little work already done.
Okay. I think there are many students here that aim to look at your presentation. Then we will have time at the end for discussing a little bit of what means inclusion or giving right to the people through design and type design.
All right, thanks. I'll tend to walk when I talk. So I'll start with this image because I'll be talking in plural, not because there's more people involved in every project. This is our studio. We have this, as Marco mentioned, we have a design office in The Hague, in the Netherlands, where we work and research languages. And we then think of a form, what kind of form we give to typefaces and to languages which are out there. So our basic matter is this. There's 8 billion people on this planet, and there's about 7,000 languages on this planet as well, right now. And this number tends to change over time. So projection is that by the end of this century, there'll be 11 billion people living on the planet. And we expect that, if this will work, yes. And we expect, the prognosis right now is that only half of the languages which are known today will survive. And this is quite troubling. So while the number of people growing, the number of languages is disappearing. And this space means that every 2 weeks, one language disappears. There are multiple causes for why this is happening, and I'll address some of them. But what it means is that the world is becoming less diverse, less rich, and and more uniform. With the loss of language, people lose identity, how they identify themselves, how they express themselves, and you can make a visual and you can make metaphors about loss of languages, the loss of biodiversity. Both of them take millennia to develop, and you can lose them in a very short period of time. And often it's an irreversible trend. Once there's a loss, it's really difficult to revert it. Of the 7,000 languages which I mentioned, about 100 of them are supported really well by current technology. And 98% of them, they are categorized as digitally disadvantaged, meaning there's some element along in a technology which prevents us to use it. For example, your phone will not be able to support it. You cannot text in one of the languages which I'll be mentioning to someone else, or you cannot publish in them, or there's no speech recognition, or there is no keyboard layout, or there are no fonts. One of these elements which is not there. If any one of element is missing, you cannot fully use this language, and often that language is very vulnerable and on a state of decline. I need to know where to click. If you look at the, we are type designers, and if you look at the biggest website out there, which is called myfonts.com, they offer around 300,000 fonts. 99% of them will be for Latin, for nothing else. If you will try to look for languages which I'll be mentioning, there'll be 0 exactly fonts for example, Santali language, which I'll be talking about, or Mayak language, which is, which we're doing research about. There's basically nothing, because these designers will consider it to be not interesting in terms of market. They try to kind of identify where there's most potential to earn money, and this is not exactly a very profitable area. If you look at the biggest company in the world, Apple, what is currently supported, you are lucky. Italian is one of the supported languages of macOS and iOS, so that's fantastic news. But many other languages are not as lucky. So there's 33 languages which are supported in written form. 20 of them are supported also by speech, so you can speak to Siri. Or if you use Google, 8 languages you can speak with Alexa. 8. There are 7,000 languages in the world. What it means is that if you, again, less lucky, you have to switch a language to speak to your device. So technology doesn't adapt to you. You have to adapt to technology in order to make the best use of it. And many young people do that, again, irreversibly. They switch to another language because they feel their own language is inadequate. It's not good enough for these companies, and that's why should they continue using it? And it has nothing to do with numbers. Italian is a fairly big language, but there are languages which are much bigger than this. Bengali language, Bangla, is spoken by 5 times as many speakers. It is not supported by any of these devices in any form. So it is not a numbers game, and this is a sample of our website. We work and develop fonts for these languages, and so far we've been working with about 36 different writing scripts, which cover about 99% of the written languages of the world. So there's still plenty of work to be done. There are more writing scripts of the world that we still need to research and understand. And often when we present this, big global companies, they're looking forward and thinking like, this is fantastic, we can use it. And we often tell them that this is actually quite complicated. It is very difficult to make one font that would support all the languages which big companies would want. Why? Because I'm showing here a list of writing scripts, but no one speaks in Cyrillic. They speak in Bulgarian or Serbian, and those speakers have different preferences. No one speaks in Devanagari, which is the writing script of India. People speak Hindi or Marathi or any of the 100 languages which are supported by Devanagari. So what we have to do is that instead of just looking at the writing, we need to understand the speakers. We need to understand communities. We need to understand the preferences in what is the most effective way to address them and make it easier to use the languages. This is a map of India, and it shows you, again, the largest writing script of India called Devanagari, which covers 3 big linguistic areas. And I'm going to show you why we have to do this research. So Devanagari is used for language called Nepali in the north, Hindi in the north of India, and Marathi, which is a bit in the central of India. And each of them, they historically, it's a different, distinct language, using the same script. And if we look and analyze manuscripts, we see that different forms which are used across different languages. So for example, it's probably hard to recognize, but if you look, for example, at the digit 1, you can find wildly diverse forms which are used in north or south, or if you look at the digit 5 or 8, they're completely different and sometimes unrecognizable. It is one writing script, but it's used in different ways. And there's no research about what the differences mean to different people. There's no literature, there's no website, there's no encyclopedia that would address these questions. So for us as a publisher of fonts, in order to do our work properly, we need to do our homework, we need to do our research. What it means is to travel, to organize field trips, to speak to people, to understand what they would really like to see, how to represent their language in the most authentic way possible. So what we would do, we would travel, do surveys of hundreds and thousands of people. Well, in this case, it was close to 500 people in different areas of where Devanagari scripts is being used to document, these preferences, to document, the metadata about every speaker, age, education, mother tongue, languages spoken, and understand how the preferences and recognition are affected. And then we could organize and understand, these and put it on map of, that if we're dealing with certain linguistic community in the north of India, we should use a different form of a numeral 8, for example, as opposed to, dealing with the southern Indian states. We could see how the early form of education affects those preferences. We could see basically, by doing this research and collecting metadata, we could, have a very well-informed preferences about what is being preferred by which first language speakers, by what age, and with which background. This set of data we document and publish eventually. Well, this, for example, shows you overall recognition, different forms. Again, it makes it much easier for us then to make the right informed decision about what to include in our work, to make sure that it's as easy to read, as accessible to the largest group of people as possible. We publish these articles. We make sure that it's open science, in scientific journals and on our website. So we usually make two different forms, one easy to access for designers and any kind of users, and then more in-depth for science journals, which we document and provide raw data so it can be verified and built upon. We also publish recommendations for other people so they can also benefit from the same research. And finally, we design fonts. And this, for example, is one font which comes with 3 different flavors. One, for example, if you're a Nepali user, there will be different forms of some letters because we found out that these are most effective, easiest to read. While if there's a Marathi or Hindi readers, they will have a different form. So, this is one example how having one typeface for diverse global population is impossible because different people have different preferences, and we need to respect that as well. Ultimately, we publish these fonts, so not just the research. It is an applied research. We are a design company, so the result of our work are products which we license. This would be probably the first typeface which addresses the entire region of South Asia, and making sure that we don't make any compromises between how we deal with Latin versus, I don't know, Telugu, Kannada, Malayalam, one of the 12 writing scripts of India which we supported. So I was very proud that this typeface system supports all of this, and this is a region where there's 2 billion people, so it is extremely complex, and it is home to hundreds of, if not thousands of languages. No one agrees on how many it is exactly. I don't have much time to go into it. If you're interested to see, there's a documentary movie that talks about the process of designing this. And as you imagine, it is, this is a work of about 45 people. So I'm standing here alone, but there's a lot of people working on a project like this to make it happen. I'll give you one more example, work in so-called developed world. You know, like often we tend to talk about underdeveloped and developing countries. Living in developed world is no guarantee that your language will work as well. So this is work that we've been doing in Canada, working on syllabics, or working on indigenous writing scripts of Canada. In Canada, besides English and French, there are also indigenous languages which have always been there. They've been verbal, but for the last 150 years, they have written form using the syllabics. And the syllabic is a beautiful writing script, which is used in these areas of Canada. Most northern forms, northern provinces called Nunavut, up there, but also in British Columbia using Carrier, that's a specific form of syllabic, or also in Central Canada. There's about 88 different languages in Canada which use this. And again, if you were going to design a font for one of these languages, you would not know what to include. If you work in for Latin, to support Italian, you know exactly the character set. You know, like if you fill these spots, it's guaranteed that it will work for your language. If you're going to work on the syllabic scripts, you don't know where to start because there's no definitions, there's no starting point, there's no ready-made software that provide you templates. There are some recommendations developed in the 1980s where most of standardization of languages have happened. Unicode is the official standard for support of all writing scripts of the world. But there are mistakes. This research has been not made as rigorously as it was for other languages. And we noticed that there are some missing characters. So when we work with communities in the north, in, for example, this language called Natalingmutut, there would be missing characters. Not because they're missing, people know how to write them, people have the specific forms, they're missing in technology, not in their way of writing. For example, this lady was showing us exactly what is missing and what needs to be improved. This lady is called Bil'Ak. She's one of the language keepers of the community and promoters of the language. What we do is, when we identify the situations, we explain that there are ways to change it. At the end, technology companies are interested to make a change, except they don't know how to do it. So we work with linguistic communities to implement these changes, create documentations, prepare the forms and solutions, and together with the communities, and this is like people that have been helping us and they've been tremendously helpful in the process, we were able to expand the current standards of Unicode to make sure that it covers equally well all languages, small or large, that use the syllabic script. And only then we can design the fonts. So I wish we could do the work right away, but it's not as simple. So we need to start with the research in order to end up with with what we're good in, designing typefaces. And we could do things, fairly innovative things, creating first cursive, the italic forms. People are very excited about having ability to express different hierarchies of text, creating different graphic variants, and making sure that we validate it with all the users. So again, part of the work is the engagement and long-term trust-based process working with these communities, where we develop often, in-between solutions. This is before implementing the new standard. We have to simulate it to explain how it's going to work, propose the new keyboard layouts, and only then, we can finally do the work. Again, there's another documentary movie, which I don't have time to show, but it's interesting, talks about process of developing, standardizing, and collaboration with these communities in Canada. Marco mentioned interest in accessibility. What you've seen in the first part is accessibility in terms of engaging with different writing scripts of the world, and we continue doing this. We also, don't think that enough have been made to make even our own language, even Latin script, as accessible as possible. So often we work with not just the digitally disadvantaged languages, but also people with disabilities who are not able to use technology as it is. And one example, which I'm going to give you, is working with a hospital in Paris, where we worked on a signage for visually impaired people. And the process, how that's that the signage, in order to make the right decisions, again, it starts with research. This hospital, and we are grateful to have full access to patients of the hospital. So it was supported by all the medics of the hospital. We could see that there are basically 4 different groups of people visiting. All of them have some kind of issue with eyesight, but often they were very different ones. So people with the loss of peripheral vision, they basically have a tunnel vision, so they only see the center. Then there are people who see exactly the opposite. They don't see the center vision. They only see, they have a central loss vision. They only see peripherally. Then some people with blurry vision caused by various symptoms. And of course, we're making sure that we don't ignore the control group, which is the healthy patients. We identified that that hospital has specific layout, and different types of patients visit different areas of the hospital, which would offer a possibility of creating special versions of the fonts for different areas. And created, part of our team, we have as in-house psychologists and cognitive scientists working with us, and we developed methods for evaluation and judging which versions perform well. So we don't do explicit tests, when people express their opinions about what works, what not. We do implicit tests, or we do performance tests of reading, either using eye trackers or using, in this case, basically, well, I think I'll show it to you, a test where a sample of a text starts very, very small and increasing over time, and measuring time how long it takes for people to recognize it. The shorter the response time, the better recognition it offers. And we would measure that response time and compare how different fonts actually perform. We start with Helvetica because that was the typeface which they previously used, and then compare it to our new typeface that we were working on called Z. And when you see this chart, Helvetica point is very high. That means it's a higher response time. Means that it takes longer time to recognize it. So we very quickly excluded it, that it was not a suitable typeface, and instead we focused on this new typeface and trying to identify the ideal proportions, because proportions and white space around letters affect how people read. So what we would do is that we would repeat the test 120 times for every person to remove the information noise, to remove the errors. So something like this happens, I need to stop it, and then there's a mask, and then control, making sure that that the patient recognized what was being asked, and then we plot the data, and there's thousands of data points to chart to see how change of proportions affects the response times. There is a curve, and at one point the curve flattens, and it is not very practical when text takes too much space, so we're trying to find a place where it's an optimal relationship between how much room it takes and how quickly people recognize it. And we can see that there are differences between different groups, that some groups required wider forms and some slightly narrow forms. So out of the the different proposals, we would be able to identify a couple of different ones which are used in different parts of the hospital. Again, this research is publicly available. It has been published in journals, but also on our website, if you're interested in knowing more about it. So typotech.com/articles presents most of our research which has been made. And this year is being implemented, so patients can directly benefit from this. There's been separate research about the use of colors, about placement. A lot of patients comes on wheelchairs, so it is positioned in a very different height than normal hospitals. And the typeface which we developed becomes the product which we sell. So we do the research in order to create something that we can also offer to others. So Z is the result of a typeface that we publish, and there is a small movie with sound, but without sound, that presents the idea. And what you see here, maybe I'll present it later, are plans, which makes
the same with languages. Half of 7,000 languages spoken today are at risk of extinction. In fact, we lose one language every 2 weeks. Z is a typeface designed for inclusivity and accessibility, for the old and the young, wherever they live, for populations that technology has always served, and for communities it has kept on the periphery. For major languages, and those that are digitally disadvantaged. Z has been created to preserve cultural diversity, a typeface for a better world.
Right. It is not the one typeface, it's a collection of many, many different typefaces, that range from narrow to wide, and that, basically, I think it's over 525 styles. Why? And each of them is available in many different writing scripts. Our special focus is again on supporting indigenous languages. So again, we make sure that the work that we do is accessible as we can. For example, now we worked with a different community in British Columbia whose characters are missing. So we worked with them to include it in the official standards. And I'm happy to say that last week, Unicode has been expanded again with the work they've been doing. So these missing characters are slowly added, and the work is even more useful. And that is the first font that supports these languages, which previously were not supported at all. So this is how proposal to Unicode looks like. We document. We need to provide documentation from different tribal communities about the purpose and the reason for doing this. We need to get the backing of all the language keepers to explain, and do the attestation that about validity of this work. And it is endless work. That there's a lot of languages, and we continue kind of finding out about what still needs to be improved. One special thing that we've been doing for last couple of years is, and especially now with the use of AI, there's a lot of concern about using data. We receive lots of data from these linguistic communities. For example, providing the cultural heritage, providing all their knowledge, in written form, and we make agreements about how we're going to use the data. It's not going to be used, for example, in ways which they don't agree with. So we made these agreements to make sure that we use it, for example, to measure frequency of letters for developing keyboards, but we're not going to sell the data to any other companies which could use it for, for other purposes, which would be anti-ethical for them. Again, this is work of many people, not just our internal team, but also a lot of external parties around the world. So this is how our mornings look like. For example, this is work with Indian designers. So, and because of time differences, we work in the morning. In the afternoon, we work with American designers. And I'm happy to say that the same typeface that works in these writing scripts, supporting the same number of writing styles, which is unprecedented, and still more work to be done. There are situations when language, it's insufficient, so we're also making sure that we design the icons. I'll show you a little bit. And also, we're not looking necessarily for universal solutions. We understand that people are different and they respond differently to different situations. So, instead of having one solution for all, there's basically this typeface is customizable. You can create your own versions depending on the lighting conditions, depending how skillful reader you are. So basically, any of these parameters can be transformed and adjusted to individual users. And same thing we do with icons. So these icons are also modifiable. So depending on expected size, you can have optical versions for small size, big size. You can adjust the weight of these icons depending on, again, lighting conditions or your design style. Or you can choose to be round or square. So there's again, it's not just a universal icon. It's a basic design system that can be adapted to any situation which there is. Right now, they're preparing an exhibition in London about accessibility design. They're going to use this, and I'm very happy that it's exactly the right use case for this kind of work. These plans, which I'm showing, they were designed by an artist in Switzerland called Andrea Philippus, and he designed these plans. These are plants which are extinct. There's a surprising link between biodiversity and linguistic diversity. When areas become decimated and nature dies, often people need to leave. So there's where we lose plants, we often lose languages. So we try to recreate these plans, which haven't been seen in decades, to make languages visible through these images of plants. So this was how we are presenting them. Some of them are spectacular, like this one, which grows in Hawaii, hasn't been seen for 20 years, and based on drawings, we are recreating them, and hoping that this work can. Oh, I'll address this. Every time I talk to my friends about this work, they often have an idea like, how do we, how can we afford doing this? And they expect that we're probably getting some money from Canadian government or Indian governments. Unfortunately, that's not true. I wish it was. All of our work is self-funded, and we have to be creative in how we do it. So basically, most of the work we do by selling fonts. So if you buy even Latin fonts, you're supporting the work on these small languages. But also what we do is that we try to kind of create new methods that would allow us to do long-term development of these. So we started something called Typotech Club, which is our own way how we can crowdfund a development of some languages which would otherwise be ignored. We created our own crowdfunding for Cherokee language, working with Cherokee nations in Oklahoma. I was pleased that it was successful. We were able to raise enough money to create a project where we document and develop new fonts, and there'll be publications about it. We'll be doing 2 more projects, and again, we use the same method that we try to be as creative with type design work as we do with the invisible work, for example, how to raise funds to do it. So we're not just relying on commercial clients, but we work with communities. So again, using any of our fonts will make a difference. And finally, I'll end with this image. This is an image of languages which are expected to disappear by the end of the century. These are the vulnerable languages which are on the brink of extinction. And we're trying to make sure that there are not as many as there are now, and that our work can make a small difference to make the world better. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Patrick. It's always really surprising to listen to the kind of work that you are doing as a collective. I have a few points that I would like to go through with you, because other than being president of the Italian Communication Design Association, I'm a teacher, I'm a design teacher, and I'm seeing there are many students here listening to us. Not all of them are graphic designer or will be graphic designer. So I would like to go through a few points with you that are key to your work and for me are key to the basic fundamentals of the design work as it is. The first is doing research. What does it mean connecting content and design form?
Well, research is not something that, many people have ideas that Googling internet is research. It is, some kind of research, but will provide you answers.
We are not talking about it.
Provides you answers which are already there. So that provides you just a quick, look into what has been made. Since we get into work with areas which are undocumented, there is no other way to start working to make valuable result besides, engaging research and creating methods to collect information that would allow us to use our time meaningfully. So, we always worried, as an outsider, you step in some area, if you make uninformed decisions, if you make assumptions about something which are incorrect, you can make a lot of damage as well. So the research is allowing us to get some confidence that what we do can be useful. And that can be made only in a dialogue with people for who we're doing it, and homework that we have to do to understand the context of the work. And this is what the research is able to provide.
You have just said something really important to me. What I'm trying to teach and learn together with the students is how to use design action as excavation of unknown contents, unknown knowledge, at the base of, as a base for the project. So just listen carefully to what Jesse said. The other point, we have just a few minutes left, but the other point is collaboration and multidisciplinarity.
Yes, I think we chatted earlier about like how everyone who wants to be successful tends to specialize and sometimes over-specialize, which means that like a specialist tend to know more and more about less and less. Basically, that's the idea, that your angle narrows down. And I think it's vital. I think it's important that people go deep, very deep in work. But sometimes there are these gray areas around, and it's no one's job. And you need to find the connections. And we do it either by collaboration with other people or by expanding our own expertise that we kind of have to step in. For example, working with Unicode, there's no profession, like there's no official job that would grant you ability to do it. So we have to train ourselves to be able to do it. Or we kind of seek out, we try to collaborate with linguists. Linguists, for example, don't care too much about written form of language. They care about spoken language. So some collaborations are more useful than others. But in general, as you know, a collaboration almost always makes things better because they offer multiple perspectives and make sure that you don't ignore something that you see. And it is art to learn to do it. I think that's what took us the longest, how to work with people, because in art schools, you learn to work alone by yourself and not, collaborate, not to, work together on the same mission. So that's something that, everyone needs to work on.
And the last point that I would like to go through is related to the function of design, the function of visual design, which is a discipline that match functionality and experimentation, visual experimentation. So one of our function, I think, is to do research and do design following the function and the needs, but also being able to produce marvel. So the unexpected in a way. So design has to get the attention of the user, not just through functional thinking, but also bringing them the marvels of our thinking.
Yeah, I agree. That function and the aesthetics, or some kind of little pleasures, are interconnected. And if you focus overly on a function, you make, create the most functional thing, but it will not appeal to people and will not be used. So it is a careful balance between how to test. This is what I was talking about, emotional accessibility. If you don't like something, you will not engage with it, even when it's highly accessible. So there needs to be addressed on multiple different levels. And it's not easy to do it. And again, this is why teamwork is more important. If we would, we have the scientist in our team. If we would leave it up to him, we end up with very high-performing elements, but they are not very pretty to use, and there's not much pleasure of using it. So again, in teamwork and having multiple skills allow us to evaluate and what is a trade-off between doing different choices. And again, that's something we continue learning, and we notice that having delightful surprises is always the added bonus. That if you can do something, not just improving something, but also looking that you wish to spend more time in such environment, it is for the best.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Peter, for everything. I would like just to give an advice for the people who are attending this speech, this lecture. Take advantage of having Peter here, so I think he would be happy to answer questions getting around. So in Perugia, we didn't have such a type designer, and I think that we found out that design is not just a creative work. So I have students that come up to me asking for applying for courses. I want to do something creative, and have to fight this idea, because design work is totally different. Design work is aiming to bring real changes to the world where we live. So thank you, Peter, for being with us and being part of this festival this year. Grazie.
Grazie, it's a pleasure. Thank you.